Hello and welcome to the Ship Shape Podcast, a series of podcasts where we meet amazing people and talk about their experiences, personal, technical, and all related to the maritime world. Come and dive in, dive in.
This week on the Ship Shape podcast, we speak to Robert Van Tol, co-founder and executive director of the Water Revolution Foundation. We dive into the thorny topics of sustainability in the super yacht industry, greenwashing, perceptions of yachting, and the future of yacht building. Welcome, Robert. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
My name is Georgia Tyndale, and I'm recording this from Lancaster in the UK, and I'm joined by Merrill.
Yep, Merrill Charette. I'm a live-aboard on a Ta-Shing Toshiba 36 in Boston, Massachusetts. So, Robert, where are you recording this from today?
We have an office in Amsterdam. Our foundation is Amsterdam-based, Dutch non-profit organization. And we are focused on the international industry of the yachting sector and community, I should add. So it's that's where we apply our work. But we were really founded for conserving nature and particularly the oceans.
So first off, what was your background and how did you first get into the slightly unusual super yacht industry?
Well, my background is in the yachting sector. So I started in 2007 as an intern at FedShip, one of the shipyards that built large yachts. And I was a marketing intern, interviewing captains and checking basically the marketing strategy. And at that time, they were one of the co-founders of a industry association for shipyards to take care of their interest, and basically a representative body called the Super Yacht Builders Association. And next to my studies, I started there 1 day a week, and 1 day became 2 days, etc. And I worked there for 12 years. Where also sustainability became a topic. Yeah, I'm sure we'll dive into that deeper, but that became, let's say, the starting point for the foundation that we have today.
Did you grow up boating or anything like that? I want to hear how you actually even ended up in FedShip in the first place.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I did grow up boating on the lake called Kaag. One of the FedShip shipyards there, Van Lent, is based. And I only knew it from the outside. Every now and then there was a huge yacht outside, and I was there paddling or sailing my own dinghy. And obviously wondering what's all going on there inside. And when I was looking for this marketing internship, I wrote him a letter asking basically if there was a position available. And there was. So it was actually a lucky timing, lucky moment to approach them. And actually, many people that I went to school with, primary school, etc., they are working in that shipyard. So when I got a tour, I was like, hey, I know you. So that was quite fun. They're really an employer for the local community there.
One of the things that I find fascinating about your background is that at one point you were working with the Marine Industries Association of South Florida. Can you explain a little bit about this kind of, coming across the ocean and bringing advice and information?
Yeah, that was a bold move, at least for a Dutchman. So, there was close contact with them and collaboration actually at my time at Seabass because they own the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, which is, of course, one of the major shows around the world for marine industry and the super yacht part of that specifically. So there was a close collaboration, and the industry association does more obviously than owning the boat show. And there's a huge service industry in South Florida. And in order to make the European industry basically connecting with the service industry in South Florida and bringing the boats over and let's say making a circular approach on how the yachts migrate throughout the year, it was a very logical thing to connect closer with the European side of the business. And that was my task.
At what point did kind of ocean innovation and renewables and all of that start coming into play with your business?
Well, ocean innovation is really of all times. There are, of course, various initiatives, for instance, Seakeepers, that has been around for a long time, where owners help scientists or projects with ocean-related research. So I would like to emphasize that is of many times, or a longer time, The, let's say, mass involvement of the yachting sector is really what needs to happen now. Yachting grew tremendously in the last decades. So if you look at the large yacht sector above 40 meters in length with 120 feet, you see that in the last 20 years, 2/3 of that fleet was built. So that part of the segment is quite young, but you see that those yachts are now coming at an age where they need to be seriously serviced, upgraded, and that provides an opportunity for more environmental friendly technology to be installed and considered. Still, you need to make sure that obviously it is a step forward and not just a shift of impact from operations to another part in the production of such a solution. So that's why we apply life cycle assessment at all times. But that's really an exciting time to be in, to upgrade that existing fleet, because yachts never or barely ever are being scrapped or disappear. So we have a growing fleet to take care of. And it's not only the new builds that allow for innovation. It's also the existing fleet that can be upgraded with that technology.
Absolutely. This is something, Robert, you and I have discussed before. When I was doing an article on recycling yachts, I remember we spent quite a lot of time talking about the fact that there's been such an uptick in yacht building, and especially the larger vessels. But then how much are people actually thinking about what happens at the end of life of these boats and, thinking further ahead rather than just thinking in terms of, oh, there's new orders coming in, how exciting. There's that kind of impulse to say yes and to build and to keep growing the industry, which is obviously beneficial for everyone. But then it's thinking into the future, isn't it? And having that kind of, future planning in mind, which maybe the industry hasn't had to do until now.
Yeah, that is correct. Obviously, there are so many companies and people involved in the entire supply chain and lifetime of a yacht, which is long. So I can imagine that not everybody in the very beginning oversees that part of the many years later. But you can, just through awareness, integration and communication, do a lot to help people and companies in stages later in the lifetime of a yacht by already catering for that at the very beginning. So basically smarter design and build, utilizing the feedback of the operators and refitters, so to say, to learn from that and to really improve the product from that point of view, to cater basically for an end of life, not for an entire yacht, but definitely for components on board, because they do have an end of life. We just discussed technology that can be upgraded. What happens to the technology currently in? Can we give that a second life, or at least properly take care of that instead of just putting it in a dumpster?
I mean, has there been, since we last spoke, Robert, about recycled yachts? I remember at the time we were talking about the possibility of using recycled materials for the actual building of the yachts. Do you know if there's been any kind of progress in that area?
Yeah, we have many interior designers that are really looking into that, also because it's no longer considered as a sort of B product. So now recycled material is quite accepted and can be still very luxurious or exciting. Absolutely. So it's not, and I shouldn't generalize, but it's by many no longer considered as a no-go. And that's already a great opening. And of course, there are many more suppliers that see the business opportunities of more environmental friendly products, and then as such offer also better solutions. So at trade shows, it's definitely, this year it was definitely the topic.
Yeah, I mean, even in terms of, crew uniform and so on, there's wonderful, innovative companies out there who are making all the crew uniform out of recycled materials. There's lots of talk about, all the plastic bottles and things being recycled. It's very much the norm within lots of other aspects of the industry, isn't it? So for that to be extended to the materials that the boats are built from just seems like quite a natural progression, doesn't it?
Yes, maybe for us, but not for everyone. So there is, of course, a lot of advocating to do there and showing that it is indeed still a luxurious experience. But it's really about leaving no stone unturned, so to say, improving where you can. Sometimes it's symbolic and sometimes it's really a significant improvement.
When you talk about sustainable features on yachts, can you discuss exactly what that is? What components of yacht does that encompass?
Yeah, then let's say we are trying to be as data-driven as possible. So it's going to be a bit boring about, let's say, data and facts. But that's really how we should look at it, because there has always been such a gut feeling about certain things when it comes to yachts. And for finding solutions, we really need to crystal out a couple of things, which first of all is the operational profile. So how are yachts actually being used? And we saw, based on an AAS study with 110 yachts with accumulated 297 years of AAS data, and we saw yachts don't sail much more than 10% in a year. And they spend around 33% of the time at anchor and the rest of the time in the marina. Now, this is an average profile. So there are, of course, some exceptions. But if we look at how the yachts are being used, that's the operational profile. And if we then gonna look at solutions, you find that, for instance, if there's an underwater coating, so anti-fouling used, that is a self-releasing one, that might not work so well on ships that sail around 10% of the year. That better qualifies for ships that are 90% on the way in a year. So that operational profile is very important to take into account for any, let's say, innovation to be considered a more sustainable solution. Then, of course, this solution has been produced itself and will likely have an end of life as well. So that production process and the end of life is important to be considered when reviewing this solution for improving yacht operations. Take a battery, of course, that's being considered for peak shaving or other, let's say, energy storage on board during operations, but how was this battery produced and how will you get rid of it at the end of its life? And if you don't take that into account, you might be misinformed. So it's really about that sort of factual confirmation or rejection of certain gut feeling or hypothesis in the sector.
Yeah, I would, Robert, on that, I would ask you to please, for the benefit of our listeners, to explain what we might mean by the term greenwashing.
Yeah, that is a bit overly used as well, but mainly it means that you overpromise and underdeliver. But let's say it's greenwashing until you have proven that it works or you have done that. So greenwashing is a risk that claims are being made without properly proving that it's true. Obviously, there's a growing market for sustainable solutions. Many suppliers are diving on those opportunities, which is great because we do need to innovate, and suppliers are really key in that process. But you need to make sure that what you claim, you can also frame. So is there a third party involved that has looked at these product features and also, again, on the life cycle assessment that can confirm that this product indeed brings the solution as presented? And this is actually both beneficial for the client and the seller, because the seller doesn't need to argue that it's true because it was verified by a independent third party, and the buyer sees proof for the product's features from an independent source. So let's say that part you can already skip. So you can basically focus on the integration of this piece of technology mostly on board of a yacht. So greenwashing is really avoidable by proving what you're saying. And that comes with transparency and assessment results, which is something that we will move to anyway, because when we need to do assessments on the entire product, you need to have the assessments of the subcomponents.
Yeah.
One of the things I find fascinating is we had an interview with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And, we discussed their voyages of exploration out into the sea. And basically they were saying that all the data that they're getting is fairly new. And what they're doing right now is kind of setting the standard right now for where we are at in order to figure out where we're going. And that sounds very similar to what you guys are doing with all the data collection. Can you talk about how you're collecting this data?
Yes, thanks for bringing that up, because that is actually one of the weakest points in the industry at the moment is real operational data. So shipyards have delivered the yacht, build it to certain expectations, but are not very well in connection with their fleet, whether it operates as they expected. So operational data is critical in reviewing the technology chosen for and even the design. So is the yacht being used as envisioned? So there's a lot of improvement, let's say, for data collection needed, but by really focusing on the technical data, mostly on energy consumption and energy consumers, we can really make big jumps forward by checking whether the yacht is in tune, basically, with the operational profile. There it is again. You want to benchmark yachts with their installed technology on this operational profile to consider them on their environmental credentials. So like your car, it has probably an energy label, that doesn't say how you drive. So it's not a behavioral element. It is what the manufacturer delivered and based on the systems in these cars. So the same we developed for yachts, benchmarking on an operational profile, and then you can actually compare them, although they're, of course, all unique.
Yeah. And how has the process been of gathering this data? Because traditionally people perceive the super yacht industry to maybe be a little bit secretive, might not be the right word, but, you know, a little bit closed doors sometimes. How have you found that process?
Well, it is certainly secretive. I think we can agree on that. But let's say if you have higher goals, for instance, to develop this tool, and you have a very committed group of leading companies and are willing to share this data, not with each other, but with us as a sort of central platform, then we can really make great progress. And also by feeding back our analysis, you reward, let's say, that data sharing. And yeah, the group behind our Yeti tool that I actually just described was so committed that, you know, there was no competition for that moment. Everybody understood, okay, we need to work on something that defines a new level playing field to move forward as an industry and continue the marketplace with environmental sustainability as part of it. And there needs to be transparency. There needs to be a standardized method to work along those lines for us to continue competing. And that was such a great, new level of collaboration, I would say, data-driven. That was great. And then you see that there's actually quite a willingness to share data. It just depends on how it's being used and if it can be anonymized. And for, let's say, the big data analysis, it's fine to be anonymized. It's just you want to avoid that you zoom in on certain particular yachts that then also may get into privacy issues. But that's certainly not the goal. And if you can look at these big data sets, it's super interesting and much more will come, so to say.
This show was sponsored by
MITA, the Marine Industry Digital Agency. We know a lot about the marine industry, whether it be service, sales, repairs, we have it covered. Right. How are we going to help you? Easy. We are MITA, the Marine Industry Digital Agency. Our marine knowledge, whether it's basic web development, adding video, sprucing up that tired website, new feature or app created for your customers' phones, we have it covered. Traditional marketing, advertising, or PR companies don't know anything about the marine industry, but we do. Check us out at www.mida.pro or drop us an email at info@mida.pro. Let's discuss how we can improve your brand, increase your sales, and take you to that next level.
Welcome back to the ShipShape podcast.
I was listening to an interview that you did, and you mentioned at one point collecting data from FedShip, which is like a family-owned business, right? So we've heard a lot of that, where it's like family-owned business. They want to leave a legacy. They want to move forward. How have you been received from businesses that aren't family-run businesses, that aren't necessarily thinking in lasting legacy?
I know what you mean. I haven't experienced it in that way. There were certainly companies that are not family-owned that were equally committed to develop a tool like this. Because, you know, it was a group of individuals. And I think everybody had the same goal by participating and making their valuable time available for this project. So I wouldn't necessarily distinguish between family-owned or, let's say, more corporate businesses. Yeah, you might hear sometimes that family-owned businesses are already so long in the business that they have a more of a longer-term approach and therefore more commitment to things like sustainability, which might be true. But in my experience so far, I'm glad to report that there's also commitment on the other type of companies. But it's certainly pleasant to work with, and it's always good to have the family members then also being involved and seeing commitment in such a family, because they, of course, go through all these phases where maybe in the corporate world, you get a specialist on a topic that becomes hot. But with a family business, you need to educate the family in order to make these decisions and move in that direction. Maybe that's a difference that is interesting to see and encouraging to have seen. Yeah.
So I wasn't actually able to attend myself last year, unfortunately, but I gathered that the Mets trade show last year was particularly eventful in that there was a visit from Extinction Rebellion, an environmental group, and they basically argued there that there is an inherent contradiction, between the idea of super yachts and sustainability, that the two things cannot exist. And that led to some quite hot topics and quite hot debate within the industry. So what would you say to that particular, not Extinction Rebellion, but perhaps those who say that even having the word super yachts and sustainability in the same sentence is an inherent contradiction? Just an easy question for
Yeah, well, an easy answer is that I wouldn't disagree. So if there's a lifestyle on the water that is invented to enjoy the waters, it's very logical that you look after the quality of that water in order to continue that lifestyle and also for generations to come. So yeah, we should look in the mirror and see what can we do to indeed extend the possibility for this lifestyle in a healthy marine environment. So other shipping, let's say industries, might go from A to B without really caring how that infrastructure look like. But for yachting, that's of course the destination. So it's very logical to take that into consideration. Now, that's of course easier said than done, but it's something that I would say unites us in striving for a sustainable future, not only for the yachting sector, but especially for the oceans that obviously play a much bigger role in any life on the planet. So there's a big role to play, especially when you consider the resources available to us as a sector with very affluent clientele. And then I don't only speak about financial resources, but an incredible network, existing investments in other type of companies that if you bring that together and can utilize that, we are really in a strategic sector, and it's almost our responsibility to more utilize that than we may do only for developing a leisure product. So there are some opportunities to more utilize that role, and there are groups that really find that we have such a responsibility and we underutilize that maybe we shouldn't exist, or this lifestyle shouldn't exist. And it's up to the industry to prove that it should. So let's take an example with Formula One, the racing events, that they develop these cars in such a way, they innovate, and that trickles down into the cars that you and I one day drive. And that kind of innovative role could also apply to the yachting sector under, of course, given that this innovation is really then resulting in prototypes and shorter time to market for some innovations, but it certainly is a comparable role.
How does your foundation stay up to date with the latest sustainable developments and technologies?
That's a very good question, because that takes up quite some of our time. So we like to work a lot with students, because education we find very important, so that we educate students, especially from maritime backgrounds, on sustainability, so they really integrate that into their future career. But they, of course, are also well aware of innovations and technical developments that are of interest for us. We utilize the trade shows, and of course the media also plays an important role to scan and be in contact with these kind of companies. So I would say a mixture, but we don't have the illusion that we know everything, but we certainly hope that they also approach us so we can help them with the podium to reach their target audiences.
One of the pillars of your company is education, and I saw that you offer classes online. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So basically, and that's not only the yachting sector, but there's a gap in skills and knowledge when it comes to sustainability, and that needs to be bridged. And therefore we say, okay, we can only accelerate the progress on sustainability when there's sufficient knowledge base in the sector on what exactly that definition is, how you develop a strategy, how you bring in your stakeholders on this collective journey. So instead of only advocating that we should all become more sustainable, we really wanted to help and facilitate this journey. So we teamed up with a course provider that provides this program to any business, and we made it sort of yacht specific and custom. So it really appeals to all the actors in our industry, while, let's say, an accredited program is followed. That's an example of how we bring an accredited program into the yachting sector for education, and really brings the basics, let's say, for getting started and making the barriers as low as possible, and the general awareness and knowledge contribute to that.
So I notice on your LinkedIn, you've written about this particular African proverb. If you want to go far, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It sounds like from your experience, a lot of what you've managed to achieve within the super yacht industry has basically come out of parties being willing to collaborate. Is that something that you've found to be particularly important in building the foundation to where it is today?
Yeah, I think it's crucial. There are always some players that consider themselves powerful enough to make changes or to drive alone. But if you define a new marketplace or this level playing field that we discussed before, you can't do that alone. You can't set standards for a methodology to benchmark environmental credentials of yachts, in this case, alone. So that's already a collective process. But also if you can bring together your collective expertise and know-how. As an example, we have designers grouped together in a sustainable yacht design task force. And what they do is to share knowledge and expertise and also results of research, because these are all, generally speaking, small studios. And if everybody is looking for this solution without knowing from each other where they focus on, it's a very waste of resources or very time or costly exercise. So if we're smart, then we share that kind of research. Let's say you give up one secret, but you gain 29 secrets of others. Yeah, that's a logical example, right? So yeah, we try to emphasize that really working together, you gain so much more speed in change and know-how than that you can do alone or for the same cost.
And you are obviously also a co-founder of a non-profit organization. What would be your kind of top advice for someone who wants specifically to work to start a non-profit organization within the super yacht sphere? What would you give as your sort of top tips for people wanting to do that? How do they go about it?
Well, first of all, I would say make sure you make a scan of what is already being done in the field that you consider starting an initiative, because when it comes to sustainability in the yachting sector, there are, in the last couple of years, more initiatives started. And that doesn't necessarily help because they, of course, also rely on funding. If there's a difference in approach or methodology, it more confuses the market than it helps. So collaboration is really key. And we try to team up with organizations that have additional or other focus areas than that we have. And we don't want to reinvent any wheel or double overlap something that already exists. So we are ourselves also collaborative minded. And that's, I think, also the responsibility of a nonprofit to really make sure that the funding that is being collected is optimally used. And you naturally look for collaboration with other organizations to complement each other. But that's, also easier said than done. Of course, there are initiatives started with certain reasons or certain support base that maybe had reasons not to join another one. But coming back to your question, I would say the start that we had was particularly strong because we almost started it like a startup. So we did a round of funding with a very clear plan of action. We wanted to be held accountable for our results. So yes, we are a non-profit, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't have KPIs or you're just a sort of organization that people join or support for philanthropic reasons. We want to move beyond that. That is really a collective investment for both the industry's future, but also to reinvest in ocean conservation to make sure that this critical natural resource continues to be available for leisure marine activity as well.
Being a man that has all the data on a specific side of the industry, what interesting insights do you have? What are some facts that you're like, whoa, that surprised me?
Well, I think that the focus, and that's also very logical because it is about sailing and exploring the waters and moving around. But I think what is overestimated is the importance of propulsion, and what's underestimated is the portion of hotel load. So the living on board, the 100% of the year time that these systems run for onboard living, especially air conditioning and other kind of energy consumers on board that run without the yacht moving, is heavily underestimated. But also data is missing there and lacking. So that's an area where we can really make a difference, need to make a difference, because their consumption of energy is more or less 50-50 compared to propulsion. So a lot to improve. And if we look at the possibilities at, for instance, a refit stage, the these are generally considered easier than changing the underwater shape of an existing vessel, for instance. So the propulsion versus hotel functions are quite distinctive, and opportunities need to be identified to further improve. But I think from data point of view, that was very clear that requires and deserves a lot of it, more of our attention.
Can you discuss any programs or services your foundation offers to exist yacht owners and, retrofitting, refitting their vessels for sustainability?
Yes, then I would come back to my example with the YETI, so Yacht Environmental Transparency Index. That is really meant as a zero baseline assessment. So what is the current status quo of the yacht? And why is that? So it's not only a score or a label, that's only the beginning. So it's the analysis of the yacht, which is obviously unique, that gives insights in where did this impact come from? Why is this score high or low? And what can we learn from this? And what can we consider at the next opportunity to upgrade? And subsequently, where to focus on. So it's really a tool where after your first score, you can start playing around with it to really see, okay, if I change, for instance, my generators, how much of an improvement does that make to my score? Is that worthwhile, the investment that is in front of me? Or does it make such a small change? I better focus on other opportunities. So it really helps. It almost guides on where to have the biggest impact versus an investment, where at the moment it's probably only a financial quote that you would review as a customer. If you use this tool, you have at least also a visualization of the improvement that these investments would make. Therefore, it's really a tool aimed to help anyone, from an owner to refit provider to supplier, to see how much impact their improvement or their solution would have, to a designer and shipyard. So even insurance and financiers find it very interesting to use this tool because they know what they have in front of them. So they can also start using it as a reference.
See, I've never gone and bought a super yacht, but I've seen the electric cars for sale where they show how energy efficient it is and throw some stats out there. Is that becoming a thing in super yacht sales where you go up and then, in the pamphlet, there's also a discussion of kind of where they fit into, sustainability?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, it happens to houses. In the Netherlands, at least, you can't sell your house if you don't have an energy label. So why wouldn't it be the case with yachts? Especially because it gives you insights in the kind of investment you're about to make, or the status of your current yacht and what kind of investments you would need to make in order to upgrade it. Also to let it keep its resale value, or to make it more successful in charter. So there are many reasons to utilize this reference to know where you stand and to define where you want to be.
I'm sure that tools such as this will already be making people think more about the future and think more about the future of yacht building. From your perspective, how do you imagine the industry might look in 20 years' time? What will the yachts we'll all be buying look like? Will they be different? What do you think?
Well, in a timeline of 20 years, I think they also need to be different because the legislation, of course, continue to be developed too, which is sort of this stick behind you, forcing you forward. But we believe in a proactive approach where, especially ahead of legislation, you can already do a lot. Coming back to the point that the whole purpose of yachting is to enjoy the ocean. So it's very logical to be at the forefront instead of, lingering there at the last and maybe even lobbying against. So I hope that the switch of mentality becomes really that yachts are a platform to enjoy a very critical natural resource to us all. And apart from having zero impact itself, that we really utilize this opportunity again with the clients as well to have a positive impact. And that can go all kind of directions. So ocean health, but perhaps also at some point making even energy available. So instead of visiting an island and plugging into shore power to use energy, you might be able to generate energy and provide it to this remote area. So you change around roles and you all of a sudden become completely differently considered from a consumption point of view and all of a sudden to a provision point of view, which could be an interesting vision for the future. Again, coming back to that greenwashing stuff, we shouldn't promise that, but it would be very nice to deliver on it and then see what kind of role the yachting community can play in society. And as such, keep your license to operate, so to say, social license to operate, which you mentioned, Extinction Rebellion. let's say, threatened that it will be taken away.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from a lot of this conversation is a sense of possibility, a sense of growth and a sense of possibility for the industry. We're kind of in a moment where there could be some change happening, and it's about kind of taking that opportunity and running with it rather than, as you're saying, wait for the legislation to come and then scramble behind it and say, oh yeah, we are compliant. Oh yeah, getting ahead of it and using this moment and using the resources of the industry, which, as you've mentioned, are quite phenomenal, aren't they? The both in financial terms, but also in terms of connections and businesses and everything. There's so much potential for growth. And I guess it's just how do you best harness that potential?
Yeah, at the moment we consider it an opportunity, but over time it becomes a responsibility, also from social pressure. So let's grab it with both hands and utilize it and make it a rewarding journey for the customer as well. And again, these are innovative projects, are not new. There are, say, owners that had such innovative projects in the past, but let's make it not an exemption, but more of the rule. And as such, prove that there's a significant trickle-down effect and knock-on effect that our industry can create for the benefits of the world.
What are you most excited for in this field of sustainable yachting?
Yeah, I do have a passion to be on the water and, of course, in a boat. So I do see, also this as a personal responsibility to continue such an activity. But I think it's really exciting to be in this strategic industry with these resources at our disposal and to see what can we all do together. Because, sorry to give you such a concrete example, but if there's a lack of infrastructure for, methanol that is restricting yachts to be built with this kind of technology because the infrastructure lacks, then I'm like, okay, but we all know so many clients and they might already invest in methanol production. So if we bring these together, and there only need to be, 5 or 10, you are actually able to create this infrastructure. So I just want to think of these potential projects without any limitations and really rally together the most powerful people in the world to make things happen that may have been considered not possible in the past, or all kind of barriers were seen. And we managed to break through those and accelerate change. I think then we are really utilizing the opportunity that lies at our possibilities.
Yeah, that's certainly brings up an interesting point when you think about it in terms of technology. And if we look at just service providers in general and like marine techs, it's like in the US, you're seeing a quick rise in the advancement of technology, but there hasn't been really thorough education of service providers / even wrangling them together. And there's many issues when it comes to that. Could you talk a little on, the youth in the industry and service providers? And
yeah, that's quite a wide topic. Yeah, youth, I think critical also there is to prove that you're an innovative industry. If you want to attract talent that want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, which is, of course, nowadays with the new generations the case, you want to excite them. You already need to show how committed you are on working on this sustainable future to attract them in the first place. Your second part of your question with service providers, that let's say you need to have the right rewards for them to consider your business, because we are quite a niche, of course. It may also not attract some companies, but if you make it visible and rewarding, if they can prove the credentials that they claim to have, and the industry is open to that and accepts that and implements their products and solutions therefore faster, we're all winners, I would say. So there's really, sorry to say it again, the collective benefit here of working together and focusing on real sustainable solutions, but only if you can prove it. And that's how we apply the life cycle assessment to verify solutions, to help decision makers finding these in a central place in a database, and the suppliers to help promoting their products. It's a very logical, let's say, activity if you think about it, but just being a sort of intervention there or a neutral platform can really accelerate change.
Well, as we wrap this up, where can people find you, read more about what you guys are up to, and possibly get involved?
Well, thanks. We obviously have our website, so waterrevolutionfoundation.org. We are on LinkedIn and Instagram active. Obviously, through email, we're reachable. And we are at the leading trade shows, mostly MedStrade and Monaco Yacht Show at the fall of each year. And we really hope that this triggers your listeners to get active and get involved, or to have an internal conversation at least with the colleagues. Like, hey, what position are we in? How can we contribute to a positive change? And are we doing enough and everything in our capacity to offer our clients a better product? And are we requesting better solutions from our suppliers? That is really a position that every company is in, every individual is in. And which is actually really exciting to work in.
Awesome. Well, it was a great conversation, Robert.
Thanks for your interest and thanks for having me. Great pleasure.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Check back every Tuesday for our latest episode, and be sure to like, share and subscribe to ShipShape.pro.